And this year they're adding another language to the mix with Java. And so, yeah. Okay, so Java as a language is basically an object-oriented programming language that's based on C++. It's made by Sun Microsystems, and the version that we're using in the first robotics competition is called Java ME, which stands for Mobile Edition. And what the Mobile Edition is not the most common version of Java. The most common is called Standard Edition, and that's the one that you've probably seen in web applications and stuff like that. Mobile Edition was actually designed for phones, which have limited resources in terms of power, memory, and processing power. So that's good because it allows to apply those things to the serial. In terms of how you would program on the computer, we're using what's called the NetBeans IDE, and it's a free IDE. You can look at it. It's used for a lot of different stuff. It's an open source multi-platform IDE, and so you can develop on pretty much any computer. And the way that it's implemented for FRC is there are 5 plugins which First has created, and you enter in the URL of a website that they'll give to you, and these plugins will automatically update themselves. And thank you. And the libraries that you have available for use are the Java ME libraries. And the way Java ME is implemented is there's a number of different APIs. The one we're using is called CODC. They're connected limited device configuration. And what that is that's all the basic generic functions that you would look at using. So that's where you apply your math functions, your basic string manipulation functions, that kind of stuff. And of course, we have good old WPILib. It's pretty much a direct port of the C++ libraries from last year. There are some differences to accommodate for some of the differences in features of the 2 languages, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty much the same. All right, I'm going to do this one. So, on the serial, the bottom 2 layers are the same for all teams. And at the very bottom, you have the hardware, of course, the serial itself, FPGA, digital sidecar, that kind of stuff. And on top of that, every team runs an operating system called VxWorks. And the LabVIEW and C++ applications run directly on top of this operating system. But Java works a little differently. It runs what's called the Squawk virtual machine. And the reason because of that, the reason this needs to happen is NetBeans does not actually compile to an application that can be downloaded and run on the serial. It compiles to what's called bytecode, and so this needs to be interpreted before it can be run. So the Squawk virtual machine is just another layer, and so what happens is you download your code to the robot, and your code will give instructions to the virtual machine, which would translate those instructions and give them to the operating system, which would operate the hardware. And this will work for most of your code, but the only exception is the vision and camera classes. The reason that these are different is because there were some concerns about the speed of the Squawk virtual machine, and so if the image processing was handled in there, people were afraid it would be too slow. So these are implemented with a C library, and this is going to be mostly transparent. The only thing you're going to have to watch out for is if you use the camera and image classes, the Squawk virtual machine does not handle free memory from the C library, so you're going to have to do that manually. It's not really that hard, it's just kind of an extra step you have to do. And most of this you won't even notice, you'll just have to type in your code. But it just gives you an idea of what's going on behind the scenes. So, how Java compares to other languages. C++ and Java are mostly the same. They're very different from LabVIEW, which is a completely different method of programming. But again, Java and C++ are very similar. Where there are differences, for the most part, it's because Java is slightly less flexible, what makes it a lot harder to shoot yourself in the foot. One of the common examples of this is pointers. If you're a C++ programmer, you know that pointers let you manually take your program and say, and let you allocate memory, which means your program takes a section of the RAM and it says, this is mine, I'm going to store some variables in here. And the side effect of that is you have to manually instruct your program to release that memory. And if you don't do this, obviously your program just takes up more and more memory until you run out. Java solves this. It doesn't have the use of pointers, which limits its flexibility somewhat, but at the same time, you aren't able to do things like taking up all the memory. So it's a lot. So it makes it, there's fewer errors that you can have with Java. It's easier to program. Just write your code, download it, and it'll work. In general, migrating from Java to C++ is not hard. Mostly people find it relatively easy. All right, so this is just a code comparison, just to show you how similar these two languages really are. For those of you who are very observant, you might have noticed that one of the differences is Java doesn't have capital letters for its member functions. So for instance, drive, it's capitalized in C++, it's not in Java. That's pretty much insignificant. It's the same exact library, but it's just the syntax is a tiny little bit different. And the other difference is the wait function does not exist in Java because all methods must be inside a class, so instead we call timer.delay. So this is just to kind of show you that the two languages are almost the same, it's just that Java is a little bit easier to use in some cases. Okay, so why you would want to use Java this year? It's completely open source. A lot of people like that. You have the ability to edit the source code, or at least look at the source code of the Squawk virtual machine, NetBeans, WCloud, the whole thing. Automatic garbage collection is what I was talking about with the pointers. So that's one huge advantage compared to C++. And of course, it's multi-platform. NetBeans can be run on Windows, Linux, or Mac. But there is a catch. If you're updating your serial to a new image, that has to be run from Windows. And same with the driver station application, as well as the dashboard, that only works on Windows. So you can develop code on any computer you want, but as far as operating the robot, that must be done from Windows computer. But since you have a classmate that's automatically has Windows, you're probably going to run that anyway. Okay, so if you want more information, the Squawk virtual machine, Java has a lot of information on their site about it. I was going to put the URL up, but it's really long and easy to copy down wrong. So my best answer would be to Google it, and it's the first link. CLDC, you can definitely check that out. Again, that would be basically your core libraries, like your math functions. And NetBeans has a great website. It's a huge IDE, very widely used. And of course, again, the good old first forums, the 2010 beta testing section. You can talk to teams who are using Java, and you can communicate with them directly. Our team, Team 1334 as well as 188, both use C++ for the testing. That was what we were selected to do. So we did not actively test out, well, I guess I can't speak for 188, but I know our team did not very actively test out the Java libraries, but we did look at I looked at the IDE and the source code. And I can say that's pretty much the same as C++.